COMP1050 Animation 2D Tools, Week 1, Lesson 1, Part 4. It's crazy. Too many parts. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about working with graphics, and we kind of talked about this kind of already when I talked about how to work with shapes and everything else earlier on in my demo, right? So again, we can start off with the basic stuff that's included in the code archive, or from scratch like we're going to do right now. So again, every graphic in Flash starts with a shape, right? And a shape has a stroke and a fill, like we talked about before, right? There's two drawing modes, shape drawing mode and object drawing mode, like I showed you earlier. And depending on how you work it out, you want to use, more often than not, shape drawing mode. Object drawing mode is okay, but it gives you less control in certain ways. So here we're going to create a coffee cup. This is kind of cool, right? And we're going to use shape drawing mode to do this kind of thing, right? So how we're going to do it, we're going to basically take a rectangle just like this. So let's try this together, right? So here I've got a new Flash document. So here, Flash, we go new document, ActionScript 3. We're going to make the stage 640 by 480 in this case, just because I feel like it. Here's 640 by 480. We're going to go 30 frames per second. Why not? Press OK. And we're going to just reduce some of our the layer and timeline real estate here. Remember, I want to see the whole stage. I want to say show all. Right? Here's show all, where I'm seeing the stage and all objects on the stage. Now what I want to do is I want to create a rectangle. So I'm going to hold down my oval, which I had open. And again, remember the little arrows tell me that I have additional tools underneath here. Click on my rectangle, make it whatever shape I want. I think it's got to be something like this. I don't like the color though. The color's pretty ugly. I'll choose like a kind of a darker brown. All right, so here's my dark brown. And again, let's just do this right, Tom. Got to highlight the whole thing. Choose a dark brown. And here it is. So I've got a couple things. Let's just zoom in to make it easier for you guys to see. So here's my rectangle. I got a dark brown shape inside, and the outside, the stroke is a black, right? So immediately I need a couple of other things. One thing to note is on the bottom right-hand corner, there's Snap to Objects, this little magnet that looks like down here. This will allow me to enter other objects in here without having to snap outside them. They'll actually position the object exactly inside the other one if I want to, right? So I take my, hold this down, make it an oval again, right? And now I want the fill for my oval to be nothing. I can actually specify that there's no fill for my oval, right? So here's my oval. And if I, just to test it out, here it is. There's no fill on my oval, right? But I don't want to do that. Not there anyway. I want to put it inside my shape. So I put one of my ovals inside my shape. Here's one. And if you notice, it snaps nicely. And I want to put the other oval on the bottom. And it snaps nicely again. Okay, so it's like a cylinder, right? Now what I want to do, take advantage of shape drawing mode, right? I click on my selection tool, and I know that if I click on this part of the shape, because it's been dissected by these ovals, now I have different fill areas. Here's one, here's another one, here's another one, and so on. So if I take this away, and I take this part away, these strokes, now it looks more like a cylinder, right? Same thing, if I do the bottom, and I take away these things, these extra strokes right here, it's cool. And I don't need this inside one anymore, so I get rid of that one too. And now it looks like a cylinder, right? Fairly quickly. Huh?
That's a database.
Could be a database. Could be. It definitely looks like something like that, right? But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the power that you can, the shape drawing mode gives you. You can fool around and make some really interesting shapes and patterns, right? What I want to do now is I want to highlight this whole shape itself, right? And what I can do is I can use my free transform tool. Here's my free transform tool. Now if I was to take the corner of this shape and move it, right, it's just going to make it wider or smaller, right? Which is not really something I want, because I don't think my coffee cup's going to be so wide, right? If I take the corner and select Shift, and move it in and out, I can make it bigger or smaller, right? So that's something I can do as well. So I can make it smaller or bigger, right? If I select Command or Control, right, and select my corner, I can skew my shape, right, which is what I want, right? So I can kind of skew my shape in a little bit, right? So here it is, I kind of skew it in, let go, and I kind of skew this other side in as well, in a little bit, and let go, right? Maybe a little bit more, just to give it that cup-like shape. Okay, there we go. So I've got a cup, kind of skewed a little bit, right? And I've kind of made the edges look like more of a cup. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see it. There it is, right? Still, it's kind of taking form. I need a couple of other things. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, just to this part. And if you notice, there's a bunch of strokes here again, right? I'm going to highlight these strokes. So I've got the stroke now. If you press Command or Control C, like Control C and Control V, like copy and paste, you can still do the same thing. So if I press Control or Command V on the Command C on the Mac, and Command V on the Mac to paste, it'll actually paste an additional oval here. And if you notice, there's two ovals that is pasted, one that's underneath and one that's on top, right? Now what I want to do is I want to kind of press my Shift key and then just shrink it up a bit. So it's a little bit smaller, and I want to position it with my I can move it around with my arrow keys, right? So it's kind of centered within my the circle itself. Makes sense? About 10% smaller, let's say, right? Now what I want to do, what I could do at this point, is if I take this shape that's been highlighted and move it down, right, to here, let's say just a little bit lower. Okay, there we go. I have kind of this rim effect of the cup. Right now I can actually take this part and delete it. Whoop. Right now, if I don't think that rim is deep enough, right, I can go back to when the shape was highlighted. This is the great thing about Adobe, and make it a little deeper, that rim. Maybe that looks a little better. From a drawing tool perspective, it gives you the flexibility to create whatever drawing you want. So there we go. So I've drawn the cup, right? Now the great thing is I want to highlight just this area, right? I don't care about this area here, just this area. And what I want to do is I want to go to this area here where it says color, and I want to pull down Bitmap fill, right? Now inside your code archive, I have something called coffeecream.jpg, if you download that. And if I press open, it'll kind of color it with this creamy-like effect. It's a JPEG that makes it look creamy, right? Let me just zoom out again so you can see what it looks like when it's a little bit smaller. Okay, so there's my coffee cup, right? Quite doesn't look like a coffee cup yet, though. There's still some things we can do differently, right? Let's work a little more diligently on this one, right? So I kind of zoom in. One thing I think we should probably do is if I go closer to the stroke with my selection tool, take a look. Once I go closer, as I approach it, boop, it changes into this really weird arc. Which means if I take it and I kind of move it out just a little bit at a time, I can make it so that the coffee cup now is a little rounder. So I kind of come closer, grab the stroke, and move it outwards just to bow it out a little bit, right, to make the cup a little bit more rounder. Right? Make it a little bit look more like a cup, let's say. The other thing I could probably do is this stroke right here, right, it's kind of brown and consistently brown. If I make it more realistic looking, what I want to do is kind of add this, instead of a solid color, I can go with a linear gradient, right? Linear gradient. Right now, the linear gradient starts off with this grayish color, which makes no sense, right, for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this thing and select like a dark brown, right? And then what I'm going to do also is I'm going to kind of put another one in the middle, right? And maybe what I want to do here is select the white. And on the corner, maybe a lighter brown. So it kind of fades to a lighter brown color or a darker brown. There we go. So kind of to create this gradient-like effect, right? Again, it looks more three-dimensional now than it did before. I can select this part now and do the same thing. If I go to my color palette and go to gradient, it kind of copies the exact same gradient that I've already created. Now it kind of looks weird because it's exactly the same gradient, and we can't see the same shadows when you create this shape. So if I click on this shape here, and instead of this transform tool, this free transform tool, I can go to something called gradient transform. It's underneath this tool. Right, so here's my gradient transform, and right now if I look at it, this little marker in the middle is where the gradient kind of starts. I can offset the gradient a little bit, to maybe to the left a little bit. Right, just to give it that little bit of offset. I can do the same thing to the top gradient. Instead of making it the way this is, I can flip it 180 degrees. And now my gradient looks a little better. Right? More of a cup. So again, in a few strokes, with a simple shape, a square and a couple of ovals, we can create something like a cup. The reason why you want to do this, again, this is a cup. It could be the end of an engine for a spaceship, right? Use your creativity. You can do a lot of stuff with this stuff. If you play around with it, and there's a ton of tutorials on YouTube on how to create some really simple shapes. You can let your creativity go, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. Let's go back to the presentation. So we kind of skipped through this. All this stuff that we just did is here in the PowerPoint. Okay? Making selections, selecting your tool, making your cup, right? As an example, I think we covered everything, right? Changing the colors, right? The whole part. And this is a really good slide about explaining the difference between merge drawing mode, which is the shape drawing mode I was talking about, and object drawing mode. So this is your merge drawing mode, where you actually can take your object and actually take a bite out of the other objects, right? Here's object drawing mode. Object drawing mode is like when the object is all one. So each object is separate, so they don't kind of interact with one another. Right? That's object drawing mode. There's one more mode we haven't talked about, which is called primitive drawing mode, where you create things, primitives, with ovals and with rectangles. And it creates them as separate objects. We probably won't do a lot of that in this course, but just wanted to mention that there's 3 different types of drawing modes. We did the gradient fill, and we used the gradient transform tool. Right? The one thing we can do is we can use the Deco tool to create some really cool patterns and decorations. Right? Some really cool stuff. So let's say right now we have this coffee cup. We haven't done much with it yet. So let's go back. We've drawn the coffee cup, but we want to kind of name it coffee, maybe a coffee cup as its own layer, right? So here's coffee cup. Maybe what we want to do is create this background layer. And I think what I have is, if I'm not wrong, if I import to stage, I can go to, I wonder if I have it here. If it's not background. I don't think it's background.psd. That's the next movie. It's okay. I'll just create my own. So what I want to do is kind of come out to show all. Fit in window, I mean. And what I want to do is I want to create another layer, but I want to put my coffee cup layer on top of it and make this the background. So maybe make this the background layer, and maybe just use a rough rectangle of some sort. So I'm going to take a rectangle, and I'm just going to create this rectangle in the back like this. I don't like the color because it's kind of a gradient, right? So I'm going to make this, instead of a linear gradient, it remembers my last choice. I'm going to make it a solid color. And I'm going to choose kind of another lighter brown color from the swatch. Right? Of course, it didn't accept everything. I meant to do it here. Now it's too dark. Now it's too gray. And if I want more control, I can do it manually too. Yeah. Maybe more of an orange color. There we go. So there we go. So we got an orange color, and the coffee cup's just sitting there, right? I want to go to my my Deco tool, which is right here underneath the paintbrush, right? Click onto it, and right now I can choose whatever I want. There's different kinds of options you have here. I'm going to choose the Symmetry Brush, right? Or maybe instead of the Symmetry Brush, I like the flower brush. Well, that's cool. And you can choose a type of flower: roses, poinsettias, berries, whatever you want. And if I draw with it, right, it'll actually draw a pattern around my my picture, right? But I don't want to do it on my background layer. So here's my background layer, BG. I'm going to lock this one. And maybe what I want to do is I want to put a new layer that's on top of my coffee cup. I'm going to call this Vine. Right? Lock my coffee cup layer. And then when I use my Deco tool, again, right? Here's my flower brush, and I want to make it a branch. Right? So here is, I want to make this kind of branch out, my flower brush. If I don't like it, if I don't like that, again, if I don't like how that looks, I can choose trees. Right? Here's my tree. Maybe that's a little better. So I'll choose my Deco tool. I go to my tree brush, and I'll just do some trees that are over here like this as well. Right? I'm not sure if that looks very good either. I'm showing you different kinds of brushes because it's kind of neat what it can do. Right? Here's a vine fill effect. I'll let it finish. Right? And I can do different kinds of brushes that we can use. Building brushes, fire animation. I can kind of draw, right? The Deco brush allows you to do a lot of different things. Grid fill, right? But we want to try and do something that makes sense for what we're drawing. So again, I want to go back to the flower brush, which makes sense, and maybe a garden flower, and make sure that it's a branch, and then slowly kind of draw this out. There's my weird fill. So it's a vine or a flower. And then what I want to do is, to test the movie again, is the same thing. Here's my flower brush, and if you notice, the reason why it appears the way it does is because I haven't extended all these layers. When I did that funny animation that I was doing just now with the flame animation, added all these keyframes, right, or these frames. All I have to do is select all these areas here if I really want this to last this long, and then right-click. If I can actually try that again. Right-click, insert frames. And one day, insert frame. Doesn't like it. Because I got a keyframe and nothing else. Because it's my vine. My vine, if you notice, is made up of a bunch of different shapes. These are all a bunch of shapes all grouped together, randomly generated. Right? If I don't like any of this stuff, I can undo, 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 and I keep on doing until I'm back down to normal. But I have all these extra layers, all these extra frames that I want to kind of get rid of. So I want to remove frames. Here they are again. I want to go into I want to add another layer, call it vine, or whatever I want to add it. And I want to go back to my Deco tool, garden flower, click on the branch, and then quickly draw my branches the way I want. Okay, so that's done. The Deco tool allows us to do other things too. for example, we want to create a stroke, right? And we want to create this symbol for this one stroke, a line, okay? And if you follow along with the PowerPoint, what it allows you to do is, I'm going to just pull up this layer a little bit more. I want to put together this layer 5, which I will call, which I will just design stuff on for now. I'll delete it later. Hide those and lock them, right? And in here, I want to put together a line, right? So here's my line shape, right? And I can use my properties inspector when I click on the line, right, to make it a certain length. Like right now, the height is 65. It's too big. Let's make it about 30. Okay, so there's my 30. For my stroke, the style, I can choose a hairline stroke, right? So I can make it a lot thinner. And right now the fill is black. Maybe what I'd want to do is make it kind of that brown color that I had. So here's my line, right? And this time what I want to do is I want to right click. Let's try that again. I want to right click and I want to convert the symbol. I want to call it a line. I want to make it, instead of a movie clip, I want to make it a graphic. And press OK. So now I have this line symbol that's in my library. Here's my line, right? It's a symbol that I can replicate over and over again. If I go back to the PowerPoint, so once I've got this line as an example, and I've created my symbol, here's my symbol, right? I can use it for, I can create a symmetry brush, right? Well, let's go back. So now I want to get rid of this line, so I don't need it here. And I can go back to my properties panel, go to my Deco tool. Instead of a flower brush, I can create a symmetry brush now that I've created my line, right? And right now, my module, I can edit, and I can actually point to my line. If I click Edit for Module and say Line, now that's the line that I'm going to use for my symmetry brush. Okay, so here it is. When I decorate it, as you can see, if I put it right in the middle here, right, so I can make it as small, or as, if I put it out wider, the line will come up a lot wider, farther away from the center. Or I can go a lot closer, as an example. Right here it is. So closer to the middle. And this line here will actually replicate how many replications I want. So maybe I want more than one replication, right? How many rotations? There it is. So there's my kind of like this, what looks to me like some spokes of a wheel, if you will. Now what I want to do is I want to add in a rectangle, sorry, an oval. But my oval, I want it to be, I don't want it to have any stroke, again, or any fill. And here I'm going to create my oval. Here's my oval, circle. Highlight it. And then from here, I can use my Align tool, right? I can align, I'm aligning to the object, right? So if I align to stage, it's one thing, right? If I select both of them, I can align to the object, and I can line them in the middle so that the circle goes to the middle of the object, right? So I've got kind of like this sun pattern, right? Or a little, an oval or circle with a bunch of spokes around it. I can highlight it now, right? And I can group it because I'm in the same layer, right? And I want to call this, I want to create a new symbol, right? I forget what I called it on the PowerPoint. Yeah. Just want to keep on track so that way you guys can do what I'm doing on the PowerPoint presentation. It's a fizzy shape. Yeah. Oh yes, I remember this now. So what I need to do now is modify break apart, right? Then I got to break apart again. and then one more time. Now they're individual strokes. Each of these are individual strokes. They're not linked together anymore. And now I can regroup it. Right, so these are individual strokes, and now I can modify the way it's scaled. Because if I didn't do that, then what would end up happening is it'd be a collection of there would be a collection of these shapes that I created. It would be skewed when I would change the scale. So we didn't want that. So let's create that as a bubble, right? So I want to call this a bubble. So I'm going to right click and convert this to symbol and call this bubble, because that's what this thing is. I want to delete it now, and I want to kill this layer, right? Because I don't need the layer anymore. It was just a place that I could draw. So here's my coffee cup. I'm going to zoom in there now. Right? Here's my zoom. It's still locked, and I'm going to unlock my coffee cup layer, because that's where I want my my little bubbles to appear. And I'm going to go to my library, and they're going to be huge, these bubbles, right? If I can actually unlock actually put in the right symbol. It's a bubble, right? Huge. And what I want to do is I want to skew this thing a little bit. So let's go to I can actually type a percentage, 200%. So here it is. And what I want to do is I want to use my transform tool. So I want to go back to my free transform tool, and I want to skew this thing or make it a little bit smaller. Here's one. Right? Right, so I got this little bubble, this little flash, right, if you will. And what I want to do with it, because this is how small it is, I want to duplicate it. There's different ways I can control copy and control paste, so control C, control V, or command C, command V on the Mac, or I can use something else. I can use option on the Mac, or I believe it's alt on the PC, and I can drag additional copies of the shape across without control V and control C. So now I've got different copies of the shape, and I want to skew it to make it kind of look a little bit different sized, right? So maybe what I want to do is put this bubble here, and maybe this big bubble I want to make even smaller because that's too big. And maybe make this one even smaller still. And make this kind of put this over here. All right, so I've got a couple bubbles that are kind of bubbling on top of my cup, right, this kind of thing. And going back to my PowerPoint presentation, I can use the Deco tool to create this dashed line, right? It's a decorated brush dashed line that I want to use to create this like smoke vapors that we want to put on the actual coffee cup itself. So I'm going to zoom in now again, right on the coffee cup. All right, so here it is, and I use my Deco tool, and instead of Symmetry Brush, I want to go decorated brush, right? And I want to go with dashed line. I got to make sure that my pattern color is kind of the same approximately as the inside of my cup. And then I'm going to draw the line, right, the way I want. So here it is. I'm making a dashed line, almost like it's coming out of my cup, right? And I'm just kind of zigzagging it up to make it look like it's steaming, right? Kind of very simple, quick and easy to do. And we've almost got the whole thing. Let's take a look. And we can put in text kind of like we did before, right? And again, if I show you the movie, this is what it looks like. There is no animation at this point. But again, you've got the beginnings of almost like this little banner ad that you can kind of put together, right? Questions before we move on? So again, I'm showing you different techniques that you can use to create and different tools that we have available to us that you can quickly use to create simple shapes that are quite effective actually when you put them together. And again, the next part is where they actually, one thing they do that I didn't do yet is they can create this curve. This is actually really cool what you can do with the pen tool. But I would have to kind of create these two shapes this light brown and this dark brown wave that they kind of use. So let's just go there for a second. So again, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this light brown wave. It's called light brown. And I'll put this just above the background layer. And I'll create another one. Actually, let's just do it there first. My light brown wave and my dark brown wave. My dark brown wave is going to be above it. I'm going to just lock this one. And I'm going to lock this one. I'm going to hide all the rest of them because all I want to see is that one dark brown wave plus my background so I can draw it properly. And if you go to the pen tool, right? If I click on the pen tool, I like the stroke that it has, right? Maybe if I can go even darker, that would be cool. I can go manually darker, right? By actually going like, I don't know, maybe something like 7.7, right? A little darker. Right, there it is. I didn't do that. I didn't do what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Where I can actually type in what I want. 7700, enter. Okay, and then what I can do is I can start off the stage here in the pasteboard. I can start with a single point. When I move to the next point, I create this curved line. Okay, now if you notice, this is a Bezier curve, right? And what I can do is I can move it up and down to create a smooth line the way I want. In fact, if anything, it's really important to learn how to do this because this is the beginning of vector drawing, not just in Flash, but also in Illustrator and Photoshop. So let's say I first create my first curve. I have a line. Now I'm going to create another one, another point. And now I'm going to create another one. And another one. And another one. Now if your curve doesn't start off really cool, it's okay because not everybody can do this right from the beginning, and it takes some practice, right? Not making it really big and ugly, but you can make it as wide or as narrow as you want. Once I click on this, it connects the actual object, and then from there, once I've got the object and I click away from it, I've got an object that I've created with the line tool, right? Now because I've got the background locked and the only thing that's available is my dark brown layer, if I highlight this whole thing is highlighted. Right now there is no stroke. I haven't added in a stroke, but I can, right? So if I go to my fill and I choose the fill as kind of the same color, and I click onto it, it'll fill my background layer with whatever I want. If I don't like it, like for example, if I say, wow, that really sucks, Tom, right? And I want to modify it later on, right? I can go to my subselection layer, right? And if you notice the lines, I'll zoom in here so you can see it. So here's my subselection layer before I fall down. And if I go here and if I actually see there's these actual anchor points, I can take the anchor points and pull them down together and change the quality of my curves to wherever I want. Like maybe this curve is a little bit too big, right? So I can kind of eliminate this. I gotta be careful else I'm gonna get this effect. Let's try that again. And if I don't like it, again, I can smooth out my curve the way I want, right? Or I can push this in. Oops, that's not what I wanted. And again, Control C, Control V really helps, and Control Z for undo, which is kind of a standard for us. Command on the Mac, of course. You can additionally, underneath this, you can add, if you go to the pen tool, there's also add another anchor point, right? You can also remove anchor points as well. So you can add as many anchor points or add or remove anchor points as you see fit. And after you add them, for example, I want to add an anchor point here, right? Then from there I can go to my selection tool or my subselection tool and then modify it from there, right? If I want to look at it in 100%, Here it is. Kind of a funny line. Not really happy with it, but hey, maybe I want to move it down a little bit though. So what I want to do is highlight the whole thing. And hopefully I've grabbed everything. Let's try that again. Highlight the whole thing. And then move it down. The great thing is once I've done this funny shape or whatever that I've got going on, right? I can also group it. And once I've grouped it, I can change the shape of it. I can skew it, make it smaller, modify it so that it fits exactly the pattern that I want, right? And then what I want to probably do is take it, copy it, and paste it. So I want to take it, I want to copy it, and now I want to open up my other layer, my light brown layer. I want to kill this one, open this one up, and I want to paste it on my light brown layer, lock my dark layer, in the exact place that I had it before, right? If you want to make sure that it is where it is, I can Control Z that, and I can go Edit, Paste in Place. So Control Shift V or Command Shift V will paste it right where it was before, right? And now if I want to, and this is this layer here, I can break apart, and I can change my opacity, which is really what I want to do, right? For this whole shape, or I can change my scale, right? Because right now my transformation, I can rotate, I can skew it, and I can also change the properties. So I can change my fill. Because my opacity is 100%, my alpha, I can go to 70%, let's say, right? And I can do that so that way you can kind of see through it, right? Now if I enable my other layer, if you see it's right on top, I can take this one and move it down. And what am I moving? Right? Because it's a graphic and I'm using merge drawing mode, what I'm actually moving is the fill itself, not the outline. So there it is. Okay, and if I enable all my layers, I created this kind of weird fill shape effect that I want, almost like spilled coffee. Is it beautiful? No, it's not. But at least, as you can see, you can try and do what we do here on the PowerPoint, right? And this is what the effect is supposed to look like, right? And what you can also do is, once you create the transparency, you can modify the curves to match up the colors. Now, I'm not going to put in the text. We kind of did this static text before, right? Where you can put in Garden Court Cafe or whatever. We're not going to go there.